This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Madison.
And I'm Hannah.
And you are listening to or watching Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast.
Yes. So we have a fun, I'm really excited about this. We are getting into a pretty big case and this is going to be a multi-parter. So strap in. We'll get to it. I thought we could start off chatting a little bit about Phoebe Hands-Jack.
Yes.
Because I did the episode solo last week and I know you listened to it.
Yeah, I liked the episode. I liked my shout out whenever you mentioned me. So, yeah.
Well, there was a lot of times where I was like, I bet Hannah would say that. Like
yeah, you know what I'm gonna say already.
But I didn't want to be like, oh, Hannah would say this. Cause maybe, I don't know, maybe you didn't. But yeah, so you were telling me today that you think
my conclusion is her boyfriend killed her, obviously.
Yeah.
Is there any other option?
Well, so basically the whole internet seems to agree with that. It seems like the most logical situation to be, although I don't know, looking into it, I do think that the second girlfriend, Bailey, mm-hmm. her thing did seem much more like it was a suicide, mostly because
maybe
her brother was in the house and didn't hear anybody come in. It's super weird. Excuse me, I just burped. It would be super weird, I think. I do find it super weird that she allegedly sat down and killed herself. That's a really hard way to kill yourself.
Yeah.
So I do think it is really sketchy. I do think it's possible that somebody could have gone in there and it seems way more logical that somebody choked her.
Yeah.
She had blood coming out of her mouth.
With Phoebe's thing too, the second you said she's not here, I'm just going to order food for one. Why would you do that?
From the restaurant that you're supposed to be going to.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I do tend to agree.
Little things like that, come on. And just how she could have gotten in there on her own, and he's super controlling already. So
their whole family was so sketchy. And also if you're innocent, I get that, because it's you're gonna try to do your best to not, I don't know. They know the system, so they know that keeping quiet is a good idea and whatever.
Yeah.
But it is super suspicious. And it's super suspicious that he didn't want the inquiry. It's why are you not curious about this? You allegedly love her. And I think too, the most sketchy thing is that he was ordering Thai food.
As soon as you said that part, I concluded he did it.
For one, you don't order extra. You're rich. It's not money is a problem. Order her food. And
it's you don't know where she has gone yet. Yeah.
And you see her purse there. You see her it was her purse and her wallet, or her purse and her keys or whatever.
Yeah.
You know that if she's somewhere, she's in the building. There's broken glass and blood. Yeah. And you sit down and have a cigarette and a beer and then order yourself some food.
Suspicious.
So yeah, no, I
highly incriminating.
I do think it's really suspicious. But again, it's not a smoking gun. Which is why I was I don't know. And it's so funny because there's this one guy who I always looked at his videos because he does videos on every single case that I've done. And his name is Dr. Grande, and he does things from a mental health perspective. He's a psychiatrist, or I think he might even just be a counselor. I'm not even sure. Okay. But so I always like to get his perspective just to see the mindset of it all and whatever. And he put out a video and basically put out there that he didn't think that the boyfriend did it, and that the girl's death was just a coincidental suicide. And he not every single comment was you're wrong. I like your videos, but this is wrong. He did it. And everyone on Reddit, I could find 3 comments total of people who were I don't know.
Yeah, I'm I'm pretty firm on my opinion, I would say.
So what are you more sure of, that he killed her, or that the West Memphis Three are innocent?
I'm way more sure that he killed her, because he definitely killed her.
Really? So I'm like
I
way
think
more
the
sure that the West
I
Memphis
think
Three
the
are
West
innocent.
Memphis Three are like probably innocent. Like I'm sure they're probably innocent. Like I don't like I my like knowledge of the West Memphis Three is Paradise Lost, which is super biased in their favor. So I don't
Yeah.
really have like a clear like back and forth on them. But with this, it's like, come on, he ordered food for one. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
I think the opposite. I'm like so sure that they're innocent, but
Yeah,
this
I
I'm
think they're
like
innocent too.
this I'm like I think he did it, but like I don't like I wouldn't bet my life. I
think
wouldn't
they're
bet all the money
innocent.
I own.
I just like to bother you by saying I'm not sure they are.
It gets me really worked
I
up.
know.
Fair.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna ask me if I'm more sure of him, like the boyfriend being the murderer, or the Michael Peterson pushing his wife down the stairs.
Oh yeah, I don't even know that is like I don't know,
because there's a new documentary on that, I think, or something like that. So it's like back in the news again. But yeah,
there's even more than the.
No, I think it's the same new one, like the newest one.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I need to go back on that again, because I didn't. Yeah. I watched it, all the new stuff, but
Reddit thinks he's a murderer, so
it just like,
and I'm inclined to agree.
It's falling down the stairs in that manner. It's just like, that seems so intense. Like she must have been like, whoa.
Yeah.
Nobody does that.
No.
Or it was the owl.
Yeah, definitely the owl. I mean, it shouldn't laugh, but I don't really know if that's likely. Yeah. A lot of people are like, owls are murderous, but at the same time, like there would be a lot of evidence, I think.
Owls are very predatory.
Yeah, they're cool though. Shout out
towards mice.
So in other true crime news, one of my friends who lives outside of a small town, so she lives on this property that's basically in the middle of the woods.
So like pretty rural if she lives outside of a small town.
Yeah, it's pretty rural. It's off of a concession road. Do you know what that is, Madison?
No.
My city friend. So it's basically like a country road. So concessions are like the main roads in the country.
Okay. Like a county road?
Yeah.
I know what county roads are.
It's probably the same thing. So anyways, basically like it has the most traffic in a small town in the country, but like basically no traffic. So there's a pond on her property. And I guess, I don't know if people like dump garbage in this pond as they're driving by the concession road. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I guess over the winter, a bunch of garbage had accumulated on the pond on the property. And her landlord was clearing it out and clearing out the garbage bags. And guess what he found in one of the garbage bags?
It was disgusting.
It was a body. So that happened. So my friend is obviously so freaked out, as anyone would be, because she walks by that pond every single day and just had no idea.
See, and last week I talked about how there was all these bodies found in trash bags. This is one of the things I was talking about.
Okay.
Why are there so many people being found in trash bags?
I don't know. But so the police have revealed some information about it. And apparently the body was identified as somebody who's been missing since last August. So I don't know like how long into him being missing did this happen.
So it was a guy.
It was a man, yeah. Like an adult.
So that person was sitting in the August heat and then frozen.
It's possible. I don't know, because that's the day he was reported missing. So I don't know if it happened before then or after then, like what happened to him. I have no idea, or how he ended up there, but so creepy.
There's it's so sad when people are found in like trash bags, because it's like, what is that? Like that's such a rude way to dispose of somebody, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess anyway, it's kind of bad, but
it is, but
being the person to find it too, that's
horrific.
A lot. Yeah.
I do have of course, like a morbid curiosity where, like, you know, I feel like it'd be kind of cool to find a body. But
I mean, I saw a dead coyote on my hike today, and I did think it was cool, but like it's kind of different, right? Because it's like a coyote like died in nature, but I did think it was cool.
My parents recently found this dead animal on their property, at their cottage, and it's like, we can't even tell what it is. Like it looks like maybe it was like a baby coyote or something, but like there's no face, just the mouth and like a perfect set of teeth.
Yeah, this one
And
had the
like,
teeth. And I wanted the teeth. But my friend I was with was like, that's so gross. And I'm like, yeah, that's gross.
yeah. I would never. Yeah, no, it was like the freakiest thing. It looked like some like spawn devil child thing, like
creepy.
because it was like missing its face.
Yeah, that's
but the
creepy.
mouth was like, it was so gross.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of cool at the same time.
Yeah, to me, animal bones, I'm not as, I mean, it's different too, right? Because they just died in nature, but
Yeah, that's like supposed to happen. But
Yeah.
people are not supposed to be found dead in nature.
Exactly.
And it's sad when they are. So yeah, that's fucked up. But let's get to our episode today.
Let's do it.
As I said, I'm very excited about this. This is a little series that I've been working on for a while, and this is BTK.
The one and only.
Oh God. I'm now like, I'm an expert on BTK now. I've been looking into this for like a month. And this is a case. This is very popular. Like everybody knows BTK. I'm assuming like if you're here, you probably know or have heard of BTK.
I've heard of him, but I actually don't really know anything about him.
Yes. And I was reading one of the books, I've been getting really into John Douglas. Okay. We all know this.
Yes, we know.
If you've been listening, you know this. I find him super impressive. Also kind of weird. But he, in one of his books, I think it was Killer Across the Table, he just like sprinkles in all this stuff about different serial killers. And he was mentioning something about BTK. And I realized that like back in the day when I first started getting really into learning about serial killers and stuff, I never really took a huge deep dive into BTK. I remember watching some sort of documentary about it, but it was like I kind of like glossed over it or whatever. So I started looking into it more heavily, and I was like, oh my God, this was such a crazy story. And it lasted for so many years. So I deep dove into it, and I was like, oh, let's do it. Fuck it. So I'm going to go through and like pretty much do it chronologically.
Okay.
I think this will be about 3 parts. That's what I have it set as. So we'll see if we stick to that. I read this book.
She is holding up a book.
It's
for those on the podcast.
Inside the Mind of BTK, the true
by
story
your boy.
The true story behind the 30-year hunt for the notorious Wichita serial killer, which I feel like Wichita, like it's so much shit happened there. By and he named this himself, by legendary FBI profiler John Douglas.
Oh my God.
And Johnny Dodd.
Oh my God. And the "and" is in tiny little letters.
Yeah. And like by legendary FBI profiler. Like, yes, you are a legend, but like cool it, man. So yeah, I was looking into what book I should use, and everybody on Reddit was like, oh, John Douglas is so annoying, but his book is really good.
That's funny. So
I did use this one. And I think that's all I'll like ramble on about, and maybe I'll just get into it. We'll talk about his childhood first, and I will just start by saying, like, for this book, John Douglas apparently interviewed a lot of people in BTK, and we'll go with his name is Dennis Rader. Okay, we know who he is. A lot of people from his life, from his past or whatever, to get a lot of the information. His childhood is kind of sketchy. It is there's not like a whole lot of information. I think his family kind of didn't talk too much about it.
Yeah, one of those.
But a lot of everything that we learned is from like either his journals and stuff. This man kept an extensive diary.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and also from a lot of people, and a lot of people wanted to remain anonymous.
That's fair though.
Which
you don't want to be associated.
Yeah, it's just, you have to kind of, if nobody puts a name to it, sometimes you want to be a little skeptical. But
true.
Just saying. So let me breathe it out. And here we
get ready.
I'm excited.
I'm excited,
okay.
But kind of scared.
And yeah, so it is like a kind of a scary thing. Like, just for anybody, like there's a lot of
trigger warning.
There's some children who were assaulted and murdered.
Oh.
This is like breaking and entering. I will say Dennis Rader.
That I do not enjoy.
I will say Dennis Rader at the same time, he is one of the most terrifying serial killers of all time because of various reasons, which I'll get into, but he's also the most pathetic loser I've ever encountered. So like
worse than Adam Strong or on the same level?
That's a tough one. Like for very different reasons. Like BTK, like I don't know. They're you tell me at the end of this.
Okay. It's a high bar. Adam Strong is
he's the worst.
I mean, yeah, you can't get much worse.
Yeah. And he's like Adam Strong is the most disgusting person. So Dennis Rader was born on March 9th, 1945 in Columbus, Kansas.
Okay.
He was the oldest of 4 sons, and his parents were William and Dorothea Rader. William was a former U.S. Marine who later worked for the electric utility K&G company. Okay. And Dorothea was a bookkeeper at Leaker's Family Foods, and Dorothea was described as quite a beautiful woman. She was described as exuding an old Hollywood glam type of look, and many people thought that she looked like Natalie Wood, for reference. And I think it's like, it seems to be quite relevant to Dennis that like his mother was an attractive woman.
Interesting.
William and Dorothea were high school sweethearts. William had been on the football team and Dorothea was a cheerleader. So like very typical, stereotypically cool people, I guess. If that's your thing, I guess.
I guess.
The family were practicing Lutherans, and the whole family lived on a dairy farm until Dennis was about 5 years old. Now, on this farm, Dennis had recalled watching his grandmother twist the heads off chickens, and he would observe how they wiggled and moved around for a bit after they were beheaded.
Ooh.
And something about watching his grandmother perform this task, he said, made him feel a vaguely sexual feeling.
Oh, that's not good.
So like that's early. And he also recalled getting this sexual feeling when he would receive spankings from his parents.
Okay. I mean, at least that's not something dying.
No. It's just a little fucked up.
No, it's fucked up. But I think the chicken thing is like more fucked up, right?
Yeah, like getting turned on by chickens being beheaded. That's weird.
Yeah.
It's not right.
No.
And like when he was really young, he said he has this memory from age 3 where he recalled finding his mother half dressed, tangled up and struggling in like twisted up in her sheets, and they were wrapped around a wrought iron headboard of her bed.
Okay.
And he stood there watching her struggle, feeling helpless. Like this is a very clear memory he has from age 3.
Right.
Now, I think that like memory is really inaccurate, especially going back to like age 3. I don't remember anything from age 3. Like I think it's very likely that he like thinks he has this memory, or maybe he has a memory of something like it or whatever, or he's made this memory up or whatever. But regardless, it's interesting that he perceives this to be a memory, and like it's something that like interested him in like a sexual way at a young age.
Right.
Like that's what we know, is that like he found the idea of his own mother being tangled up in some sheets, not wearing all of her clothes, and like struggling, and he enjoyed that, and like he stood there watching it.
And he had like a healthy family?
Well, we'll get into it, but for the most part, that's the story, and that's where I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about that. But I'll tell you a couple more little tidbits from I have just like little fractions and little pieces of his childhood and younger years, though there's more as he gets older, that just kind of give you a little like flavor of what it's like. To me, it's like this is what he perceives his memories of childhood to be, because a lot of this comes from him or from other people, and like the stuff that comes from other people is a little bit more, I would say, not accurate, but probably more likely to be true to what I'm saying. Like I think when the stuff that he has to say, it's like your memory might be really flawed, but somebody else's memory of their family, I think it's a little bit more reliable.
Right.
So This story was a secondhand telling of Dennis's friend, who wanted to remain anonymous. So we'll take this as you will, but I thought this was important to include because it seemed to have a big effect on him. So apparently when Dennis was a child, and I don't know at what age this was, but I'd say it's probably like, I would guess somewhere around 10, like give or take, something like that. Or maybe even a bit younger, maybe like 7 to 10. So in the summers, Dennis would spend a lot of time at his aunt and uncle's farm. He spent his days hanging out with his cousin Larry. Now, Larry's father was a local sheriff, also named Larry, and the boys had a lot of fun together. Larry was 5 years older than Dennis, and apparently Dennis really looked up to Larry. It was like a fun cousin relationship, whatever. There was one incident that happened with Larry that really stuck with Dennis forever. And it wasn't even like Dennis wasn't even there, but one day, Larry was swimming at a nearby pond with a friend of his, and the friend wound up drowning to death.
Wow.
Larry was really nonchalant about this whole thing. This incident happened, and then he showed back up at home without his friend, and his parents were like, "Where is your friend?" And Larry very calmly stated, apparently, quote, "He dove down into the pond." And then what? Asked his parents. And he said, quote, "I walked back home." And they're like, "Well, what about your friend?" And Larry just said, "He didn't come back up. He stayed under the water, I guess." And so this was not even Dennis. Dennis was not even there. But the boy was then found floating dead in the pond later. And
dear God,
this was Dennis's like first real brush with death. And for him, it was more, I think, that all the parents like started talking in hushed tones about it, and they were really secretive, and like everyone was really up in arms about this whole incident. And Dennis was just like really intrigued by this whole situation about like clearly he knew what had happened. He could understand what they were upset about and what everyone was really worried about. And he was like really seemed to be really affected by it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would be.
But it's like he was more interested in like why they were like so weirded out by it than the fact that
right.
So there's
I guess they just didn't want to like tell the kids what happened.
Yeah, I think especially like this was what year was that? This was in like the 50s. So, you know, even people were like not as open as they are now. I'm sure that they were trying to keep things from kids. And so like the secretiveness was like probably like really intriguing and interesting.
Yeah.
I know but like it's, you know, I would have been exactly the same. I would have been really interested too. So I'm not saying that like made him a murderer, but
right.
Just an interesting layer to this.
Maybe the getting turned on by chickens dying.
That's definitely like more weird.
Yeah.
So, and here we get into it. So ever since Dennis could remember, he was obsessed with strings and chords. He would go looking for them in neighbors' garbages. He drew pictures of mummies. Like he liked the idea of being wrapped. He really liked the idea of being tied and bound himself. And the idea of tying up and binding others. Right. He liked the pressure of the bindings, and he would get boners just thinking about it. Yeah. Now, it's unclear like where exactly this started. You know, he thinks that he has these memories from age 3. So there is no incident in which he was like bound or tied or something that we are aware of. But it's just, he just says like ever since he could remember, that's what he's been really into.
Okay.
So he also said that he used to steal his mother's underwear and masturbate with it.
Super normal.
Super cute. Yeah. So I do think like there's a lot to do with like his mom's underwear.
Yeah,
like,
a lot to do with his mom.
I don't know. Like, I'm not a guy, so like I don't know, but it's just like if you're gonna be stealing,
do you think that's normal?
I have no idea. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I'm assuming it's not.
I wonder if his mom like ever did anything to promote that, or if he was just like, taking it on himself to be that way.
That's the thing. She has never admitted to anything, and nobody has ever accused her of anything. So it's very possible, but there's no proof whatsoever. But yeah, he developed a pretty big fetish for women's underwear. He would take from his mother. He would also steal from neighbors. He would wear it. He would jerk off with it. Very a la Russell Williams.
Oh, you know, yeah.
Good thing
Did he catalog himself?
He didn't have access to a digital camera, but later he does catalog things. He does like save things, and I'll show you some. You should go into the drive and take a look at the pictures. But there's an extra folder that says bound on it. Don't open that one until I tell you, because that one's a treat. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
I saved that because I didn't want you to see it before. So anyway, he's got this fetish for women's underwear. He really likes binding himself, tying himself up, the idea of tying up others and all that. And he like gets boners and like loves it. Cute.
Okay.
So as Dennis got older and his urges grew stronger, he started going out to isolated fields and forested areas outside of his neighborhood and tying himself up. And he loved it. He just loved it. It was very sexual for him. He'd get huge boners, and he realized he was able to ejaculate to this situation without having to like do anything. And from that point, he was like hooked. He loved it.
If only he left it at that.
Oh my God, if only. So yeah, as I said, there's no evidence that he experienced any sort of actual trauma. I read in some places that he may or may not have had a head injury as a child, but other than that, there's doesn't seem to be any instances of him being abused by family members or others, unless he is lying, which is definitely possible. This guy is not a stranger to lying. He's a liar.
Yeah, but I feel like he would say if he was, right?
I don't know. He's very narcissistic. So it's like, I don't even know if like maybe he just like wants to take credit for what a fucked up individual he is.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a big mystery of this all. And even John Douglas is like, I kind of feel like he's lying, because he's like, I've never found a serial killer who did not experience
That's
trauma.
the thing.
He's not like abused. Like that's how this comes to light. And generally there's probably a bit of a nature nurture, like there's a bit of a predisposition, but then like you add on somebody beating you as a kid, and like,
how often does it happen that they haven't experienced any type of trauma? And like it could be one of those things where it's like a sexual thing that escalates, but even still,
yeah, it just is, especially because it seems like he had like a pretty good childhood. Like he came from a nice family. There was no, like, it wasn't like his parents were like tense and like kind of weird and like there was a divorce. Like his parents were still together, nice people liked them.
So strange.
His mother seemed to be like attractive, but like,
I mean, yeah, he was attracted to her, so
yeah. So as Dennis got older, he got really interested in killers and torture.
You don't say.
Started finding out about these things. He had a very active imagination, and basically we'll learn like this man lived in his head. Like that's his whole life was just like spent in his head. And that's,
did he have friends, Madison?
Yes. But I don't think he really cared about any of them. But we'll see. We'll learn about this. So he had a very active imagination, and in about the 6th grade, he learned about the serial killer H.H. Holmes.
Oh, okay.
Who I'm sure we all know about. He was the murder man.
Big time creep.
Yep. And he learned about his murder hotel in Chicago. And he was very fascinated by this. And Dennis would draw up elaborate plans for his own torture chambers. And he would spend a lot of time thinking and talking about torturing and binding the girls in his class. And like he would say this shit to his friends, and his friends were like, oh, cool, like whatever.
Oh, come on. Friends.
They were like, you know, I don't think they really understood it, like what he was actually saying. I think he probably said these things in like, he's like, we'll get the girls and like whatever, you know, in his own little freaky way. But his friends did end up like getting pretty weirded out by this. And like, he would show this shit to teachers, and teachers were like, that's not fucking normal. And because he wasn't hiding any of his interests, and he very specifically had fantasies about meeting a pretty girl and tying her up like a mummy. Like that's how he would describe like the bindings.
Okay.
And so people did think this was weird. So, and like later in high school, Dennis started to really begin to understand that these things were not normal. And so he learned to keep his thoughts to himself. and hide all of his very twisted,
kind of good
sexual fantasies.
Kind of bad.
It's like, yeah, it's bad because like, you're like, if somebody's thinking these things, like, at least I want to know, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Let me know that you want to torture me in a chamber and then I can stay away from you.
Yeah.
But he, you know, due to people's reactions to his thoughts and feelings, he was like, oh, true. This is not normal. I will keep this in here.
He seems like he's like relatively socially intelligent.
He's relatively intelligent. Yeah. He's
like to be able to make that connection.
Yes. A lot of people think that he's quite intelligent. He's quite intelligent, but he also has some like pretty big fatal flaws, and you'll see in like how he gets caught. Okay. He's able to like understand what is socially acceptable and what is not, but also not really. You'll see.
I'm looking at his drawings on the drive.
Yeah. So Dennis really never got in trouble in high school. So when he's in high school, he came off as like there was very respectable kid, very well behaved. Dennis had friends, but he was very much like he preferred to be a complete lone wolf.
Wow.
He never stood out for any reason. And all of this was extremely intentional. Like, I think I would even go as far to guess that like the fact that he had friends was because like he was like, okay, normal people have friends. I'll just get some friends. Like he didn't really care about any of this stuff, but he had such fucked up shit going on in his head, which he now knew was super fucked up, that he's like, I must appear normal on the outside. He was just constantly thinking about like horrible sadistic thoughts, and it was his favorite thing to do, just like sit there and fantasize about it.
Wow.
About tying people up and strangling them and killing them.
Oh, that's bad.
Particularly women. But
and for sexual gratification purposes.
Yes, specifically for sexual reasons. And he also, again, really liked the idea of like being bound up and tied himself.
You should just keep it at that. Like, just leave it to that.
Yeah, because it's like in your head, fine, that's cool, but it doesn't stay there.
Like, tie up and strangle people.
Yeah, he loved it. And and I think it was because of this. He was really not a hard worker. He didn't try hard at anything. A lot of people were like, he's like a smart guy. He has like a lot of potential, but like he doesn't try ever. And this is
interesting.
It's because he's literally spending all of his time thinking about finding and murdering and torturing women.
Dear God.
So Dennis, throughout his high school days, continued to find secluded locations to bind himself, but he also started doing this to stray dogs and cats.
No.
Mm-hmm. He would go out and find a stray cat or dog, and he would strangle these animals to death and like masturbate on and jerk off, and
that's leave their so creepy, and I hate it.
Yeah, he would find abandoned barns, and he would bring all his equipment, all his ropes and things his little kits.
Dear God.
And he would take the dog or cat and tie them up and strangle them and watch them slowly expire and then jerk off. He loved the feeling of power over somebody else's life. It was, and like he loved doing it to animals, but he wanted so badly to do it to a person.
How old was he when he was doing this?
High school.
Ew. So and it's like he was hiding it. So imagine if he got counseling at this point or something. I don't know if counseling can help, but
I truly think that he's not somebody that anybody could have helped. Like he would, like they could have like locked him up or something. You're like,
just like, get him out of here.
This is very deep seated.
Crazy how he isn't known to have any traumas too.
That's the biggest mystery, and that's what people like. Nobody can accept that.
It's hard to accept.
Yeah. So in 1963, after graduating from high school, Dennis committed his first planned break-in. He broke into his old high school and wrote obscenities on the chalkboard.
Okay.
Very badass.
We'll allow that.
He started small. And so like at this point, I don't think he's even really thinking about, like he's thinking about murdering people, but like actually doing it is like pretty far off so far.
Right.
In 1965, Dennis started attending college at Kansas Wesleyan which was 90 miles from Wichita, where he was living.
Okay.
And Dennis had a really hard time making it through financially, but he took this opportunity. Like he just kept working and paid his way through, but it was hard. But he took this opportunity to completely reinvent himself. Nobody there knew him from a hole in the wall. So he just became this completely new person. And he like, started partying and drinking and deciding to be like a social person. He really enjoyed putting on like a completely fake facade while still spending all his spare time fantasizing about finding and torturing people.
It's terrifying.
And this is pretty much how he would spend the rest of his adult life. Now, interestingly, despite Dennis's very active sexual fantasy life, he was entirely clueless about women. He was a virgin and had no clue how sex even worked. And like,
really?
Yeah. And this is to me, like, this is why like porn is so bad for like young kids, right? Like he essentially had like torture porn going on in his head all day, every day. And so it made him like, it made him like not be able to see women as like people or like understand how to like talk to them, because all he wanted to do was torture them. Like imagine that's going on in your head and you're trying to like,
but he didn't have any social connections, right?
No, he did. He had friends in high school. He like hung out with kids. He was, and he
like he knew how to talk to people, but he secretly just didn't give a shit about them.
Yes, and I think he definitely spent more time with guys. Like I don't think he like had girlfriends or
I think that's
whatever.
pretty normal for like a lot of high school people, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm sure people were just like, oh yeah, Dennis, like he's just like not good with girls or whatever, or, like not really interested. Maybe people thought he was gay. I don't know, but he had at that point in his life, he'd been fantasizing about torturing women for years and years and years. Ugh. So it must have been, I have to assume, very difficult for him to like have a conversation with a girl. Because like you just don't see her as a person. You just see her as somebody you want to like dominate and kill and like rape, basically. So by the time he's in university, he's like a weird virgin who like doesn't know how to talk to girls. And he was like a pretty attractive like young guy. So I'm sure there were girls who were like into him, but like he just didn't know how to go about it. So his college and post-college years were also during the Vietnam War. And although one might think that Dennis would welcome the idea of being drafted and potentially seeing some combat action and maybe killing a person or two, that was not at all the case. And it actually makes sense because Dennis was only interested in harming weaker, vulnerable people. People that he could surely have control over. He was not interested in any sort of fair fight with a capable man. So actually pretty smartly, what Dennis did smartly, intelligently, I don't know, this was a plan that he came up with. To avoid the draft, Dennis decided to join the Air Force. And there he specialized in radio communications. And this way he could get involved in a technical field while never actually being expected to see real combat.
Yeah, I guess that's smart.
Yeah, that's crafty.
Yeah.
Dennis really enjoyed the military life. He loved the routine of it. He loved the uniform. This man is so into uniforms. He loves
like
uniforms.
Turned on by it?
No, maybe, I don't know, but I think something about, I don't really understand it, but it's like something about it, like it's like he's an official. If you're wearing like some sort of like military or some sort of like police like
you uniform, feel powerful, like, kind of.
You feel powerful over other people. I think that's what the point is.
I could see that. And it's like you didn't feel powerless as a child because your parents were abusing you. Like why do you have this?
No clue. Okay. So Dennis worked his way up to a higher position where he was put in charge of other people and fucking loved that. He loved having any little bit of power over other people. He fucking loved it. It's a freaky little fuck. After and during his time in the Air Force, so he spent like 2 years in the Air Force. He did some rounds in like other countries. He lived in other countries and stuff. And while he was in the Air Force, he started to loosen up a little bit and started spending time hanging out at bars. I'm sure like the atmosphere of like all the guys and like who were doing that kind of shit kind of helped him to like loosen up. And he finally experienced sex with a woman, but it was
Cool.
all sex workers. He got really into sex workers, prostitutes. He
Okay.
loved them. Specifically, he really liked Asian ones,
Okay.
which if you're gonna like, I'm sure the stereotype at that time and maybe even to this day is that Asian women are which is, I'm not saying it's true, I'm saying this is a stereotype, is that they're more, what am I saying, docile, not docile, what's the word I'm looking for,
Like more submissive.
yes, exactly, which that's what he wants in a woman. He wants submissiveness, right?
Right.
So a number of them,
He's such a creep.
he's so fucking creepy. A number of times he tried tying these sex workers up, but they were all way too experienced to let him get away with this shit. And he was like such a loser that like they were like, no, fuck you. And they would like never let him get away with it.
That's interesting. He wasn't that intimidating to them, I guess.
And for whatever reason, I don't know why. I would imagine that he like is really like he's never had sex with a woman. Like that's got to come off. Like, and these are sex workers working in I don't know where, but these are street smart women who like their survival is dependent on them like understanding men. I'm sure they have the upper hand here. Plus, I don't think he's like he's not like thinking things through quite like this is like the beginnings of his freakish murdery ways. But what they did allow him to do eventually was start photographing them. And so Dennis would like take photos of them, probably like naked or whatever. And he would then go over the picture and draw nooses and bindings on top of them.
Oh, come on.
And then jerk off to those photos.
I mean, I guess that's better than actually like, okay, fine.
Yeah. Like, and that's the thing is like, if that's the kind of shit that you're into in your own head, fine. But as soon as you start putting that on other people, then it's not
cool.
And even if that is just your thing, like, I'm sorry, but like it's probably a little not healthy. I don't know if it's like that, if it's at this level.
Yeah.
Again, no need to upset the BDSM community.
Yeah, don't kink shit.
But anyway, he then started to cut out photos from magazines and draw stuff over top of those. He loved the idea of like going through a magazine and like choosing people and being like, I pick you, you're gonna die, and I'm gonna draw a noose over you, and being like, oh, you'll live. We've seen this before. This is the God complex thing.
Yeah.
That all these guys have. They love deciding who's gonna live and who's gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's pictures in magazines.
Yeah.
Loser. And he would make little collages and fantasize about binding and torturing these people that he cut out in magazines. He got so obsessed with these freaky little collages that one time he ran out of magazines and he was so desperate to do some collaging that he broke into a library at night just to steal a stack of magazines so he could continue collaging.
So random.
But this is why it's like he's so freaky, but he's such a loser.
He broke to like get the collage.
Yes. Like,
I mean, they didn't have the internet then, right? So
no. Yeah. And like literally
entertain yourself somehow.
You had to like go like buy magazines or whatever. And like you couldn't just like print out pictures, but still like, dude, wait till the morning. It's that bad. Anyway.
Yeah.
Even his disgusting scrapbooking fetishes weren't enough to satisfy his urges.
Oh, fuck.
So he started stalking real live women. He would pretend to hunt them. He would gather up ropes and cords and gags and all his equipment. And then he would go out and he would choose a woman and he would follow her around and he would just think about abducting her and torturing her and raping her and killing her.
I do not like
without
that.
actually doing it. Dennis reasoned that this wasn't actually, since he wasn't actually touching these women, and that soon enough he would move back to Wichita, he would get married and find a job and join in the church and live life as a normal person. He was like, I could do this and then I'll just forget about it and it'll be fine.
I mean, if that's the case, then I guess.
But as we know, this was not the case.
No.
But in 1970, Dennis did return to Wichita and he started spending time in the church. He did meet a woman, and her name was Paula Diaz.
Oh,
And
shout out.
she was a lovely young woman, very beautiful. And to this day, nobody has a bad thing to say about this woman.
Okay.
And fun fact, not very fun, but fact, you cannot find an image of this woman online.
I was about to ask you for an
Cannot.
image.
She's somehow scrubbed the internet clean of photos of her. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I tried a lot to find photos of her. I could not.
I think you can do that. I think you can.
I'm sure a more internet savvy person could probably find something, but I cannot.
On the deep web.
Yeah, I'm not that internet savvy. I try. But anyway,
nothing on Reddit, Madison.
I couldn't find any. Maybe it exists, and I'd love.
I feel like Reddit has a lot of stuff.
There's got to be.
That's where I found the Jeffrey Dahmer crime scene photos.
People can't it can't be that easy to get everything off the internet. But she's basically been in hiding since this all went down. But anyway, she was introduced to Dennis by Dennis's mother at church. Basically, he started going to church. He came back, and she's like, "Oh my God, I found this girl at church for you." And he's like, "Okay." And then he met her in 1971. They were married. It was that easy. Paula was also from Wichita. She had grown up in Park City, which is, I think, just outside of Wichita or in Wichita. I'm not sure. In and around. It's close. And she was only a few years younger than Dennis. The couple moved into a house in Park City near Paula's parents, and Paula got a job as a bookkeeper. And in 1972, Dennis got a job at the Coleman Company. And it is a company, I don't know. It's just like a factory. They make something. I don't know what they make.
Okay. It's just like a random factory.
Yeah, it's not.
There was a lot of factories back then. They didn't have like robots doing everything.
Yeah, this was the time of like factories, and those were like good jobs where like you could support an entire family on like the dad working at a factory. Like gone are those days.
Yeah.
But these were those days.
Right.
He was very heavily involved in the church, and he was a Boy Scout leader.
Oh my God.
And that he did not give a shit about either of these two things, although he definitely loved the Boy Scout uniform.
I don't like that he got to be like involved with Boy Scouts.
But we know that he specifically did this to appear normal.
Right.
So Dennis,
creepy though, like don't be around boys. No.
Yeah, and he's not even like into little boys. Like
that's true. Yeah,
it's not his thing.
Thank God he's not.
He just knows. Like he's like really into knots and bindings. So
right, Boy Scouts do a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
So from all accounts, Dennis and Paula appeared to have a great marriage. Dennis was very loving toward Paula, and they got along really well.
Wow.
He literally, like, everyone was like, he would be opening doors for her. He was kind to her. He was a good husband. Now, and these,
weird.
This is the 70s. This is like a very very religious community. Who knows like how intimate, like I think that they were not a very intimate couple.
Interesting.
He
wasn't trying to tie her up and strangle her.
No. I'm sure that like this is the type of relationship that I would have been like it would have been an unsatisfying relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Intimacy wise.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I think that especially Paula seemed to be very into like being a woman of the church and like having a good reputation in the community. So like that, I get the idea. This is my opinion here. I get the idea that like they had a very like picturesque marriage,
right?
That both of them, that was like mutually good for them, and like and like
socially good for them.
I don't think she suspected anything ever.
Oh my God.
And we'll get to that.
Okay.
Dennis appeared to have it all together. He had a great job and he was making good money, and he had a home, a lovely wife, and he was involved in the community, in the church and the Boy Scouts. But then in 1973, the oil crisis happened. I didn't know much about the oil crisis, but basically it began in October 1973 when, and this is from Wikipedia, I didn't look too much into this, but members of the Organization of the Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, led by Saudi Arabia, proclaimed an oil embargo targeted at a bunch of countries, including the United States. So it basically just jacked up the price of oil by a lot. Kind of like what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Fuck.
And this resulted in Dennis getting laid off from his job, along with 500 other people.
Shit.
This was really shitty for Dennis. He was
not good.
very upset about this. And fair enough, like it's not good.
Yeah.
And the day that he was let go, he got in his car and he was in a huge rage and he drove around. He chose a house, he broke into it and like just
Hate
like
that.
went in there and was like, and he stole a hatchet. And then he left.
I don't like that.
And that was it. But that is where we see Dennis take a deep downhill dive mentally. And he kind of claims that this is like the, I guess, like inciting incident for like what he goes on to do.
Him getting fired, huh?
Yeah. Which I think is like convenient to blame it on something like this. I think.
Yeah. I mean,
anything.
That is upsetting, but it's also like, I mean, it's not like an excuse.
No, God, no.
It's not like, oh, somebody killed your family. Like that. No. I get that, you know?
Anyway, things were not great for Dennis after that. He had a lot of trouble finding work. Who knows how hard he was trying. He was not a hard worker. So like, I'm sure he was not trying very hard to find more work. And this made Paula the main breadwinner, which Dennis did not like.
Did not loss of power.
Things. Yeah. And it's like specifically like your wife or whatever. That was the thing. Dennis.
Right.
He began journaling very heavily and writing his own stories, which were disgusting.
Oh, what were his stories?
They were disgusting rape and torture fantasies, many involving underage girls. They were just nasty, and they were written really poorly. This man
really
cannot spell to save his life.
There was no spell check. Honestly, Madison, if there wasn't spell check, like I would write poorly. So I can't even judge.
I've never come across somebody, and I'm a bad speller. I'm not good at it. This man writes like he's missing half his brain.
That's funny.
It's like I'll read.
He just like things. Doesn't try.
I'll read some things that he's written, and it's like you can't even try to say them word for word. Like you have to just like, fix all the spelling mistakes and stuff, because otherwise it's unlegible. You can't read it. It's so bad.
Okay.
But anyway, Dennis began journaling heavily, writing his own stories. He also started following women around and stalking them again. And he tried to convince himself that he wouldn't take it any further.
Don't like that.
But he knew deep down that this was the start, and that.
Yeah, why would he stop?
So finally one day, kind of impulsively, he spotted a woman coming out of a grocery store, and he decided that he was going to snatch her, take her somewhere, bind her, rape her, and strangle her. That's what he was going to do. And he did approach her in the parking lot, and he grabbed her. But she started fighting him and kicking and screaming. And Dennis was shocked at how strong she was, and realized that this was a huge mistake. And he let her go and he took off. And the lesson here for us is like, put up a fight. Somebody grabs you, fight. Okay.
How big was he?
Regular size guy. He was not particularly large.
Okay. That is a good strategy. You can Kemper's like 6'9" or something. Like you're not gonna. And
I mean, even if somebody has a gun on you and is like, get in the car or whatever, run. Maybe you get shot. Maybe you get shot in the leg, but you have your life. That's my 2 cents on that.
Good advice, Madison. My advice: get a really big dog.
Yes, and this is what we'll learn from this. This is scary, but like if you have 3 dogs, you're fine. Yeah. The first murder was a dog, and he was like, never again. Anyway.
That's right.
It was then that he realized he would have to put a lot more thought into this. This. So I'm going to start. This is going to be the first murders.
Oh, okay.
So January 15th, 1974, the address is 803 North Edgemore Street, and it's 7:50 a.m.
Okay.
Dennis Rader had been stalking out the Otero family for less than 2 weeks. He had his eyes set on Julie, the mother, and the youngest daughter, Josephine. He figured out their morning routine. He called their home a number of times to see what males lived in the home. And he made his plans accordingly. Having never encountered the father, he believed Julie to be a single mother. This was incorrect. On the morning of January 15, the three oldest children, Charlie, age 15, Danny, age 14, and Carmen June, age 13, had already left for school. The two youngest kids, Josephine Otero, age 11, and Joey Otero, or Joseph Jr., age 9, were finishing up packing their lunches with their parents, Joseph Otero and Julie Otero. The Oteros were originally from Panama Canal Zone, which was like an American piece of land or whatever in Panama Canal, which no longer exists.
Okay.
And there, Joseph was in the Air Force. They moved to Wichita, Kansas in the fall of 1973. Joseph had a commercial plane license and he was working as a mechanic, and he was also teaching flying lessons. Wichita is home to a very large Air Force base, so it attracts a lot of Air Force and pilot families.
Okay.
This morning, with the older children already off and the remaining 4 family members still in the kitchen, going about their normal day, Dennis Rader was lurking and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He made his way into the backyard at about 7:50 and waited until little Joey came out into the backyard and to take out the trash. Then he grabbed Joey and dragged him back inside. And the Oteros that remained would never make it out of their home alive.
Wow. This really escalated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dennis Rader led Joey into the kitchen and he pointed a gun at the family. He told them that he was recently released from prison and that he needed some money and some food and a car. The story kept the family calm, as they were led to believe that they would be left unharmed if they gave over what he was asking for. He led them all upstairs. And mind you, they have a German Shepherd. He put the German Shepherd in the backyard.
Oh, fuck.
Now, if there had been 3 dogs, this man would not have stayed. I'll tell you that. And he would never enter the home of somebody who had a dog again, by the way. That at least
I just go out and adopt like 5 more dogs.
Yeah. But yeah. So he led them all upstairs and he tied them up in the master bedroom. Joseph on the floor, Julie on the bed, and the kids on the floor on the other side of the bed. All of the family complied and allowed Dennis to tie them up. And Dennis assured them that it would all be okay as he bound them very thoroughly.
Oh, God. He was probably so happy to do it.
Oh, he was loving this.
Yeah.
Joseph, the father, complained of some rib pain due to a car accident he had been in recently, and Dennis rearranged his body and got him a pillow. He also loosened Julie's restraints upon her request. But just when he had everybody restrained and bound to his satisfaction, he put a plastic bag over Joseph Otero's head and put a cord around his neck and began to strangle Joseph Otero. And that is when everybody realized, like, oh, he's going to kill us all. And like chaos ensued and everyone's screaming and it's very chaotic. Dennis, I don't think was expecting this many people, but just went with it. And it was a lot for him to, like, he had them tied up. So that's how he had them under control, but it was chaotic. He did the same thing with Joey, and Dennis successfully suffocated and strangled both parents to death, although it took him more time and strength than he was expecting. And also, it took him multiple tries with a lot of them. Like, he would strangle them and then they would like pass out and they would wake up and he would have to like go back and forth. Like, this was not a clean execution.
I mean, it's like you go from murdering nobody to trying to murder a whole group of people, like a whole family.
Yes.
Okay.
So at some point he had put a bag over top of Joey's head, the boy. And at some point he pulled the bag off and Joey's head, you could see Joey's head, but his eyes remained closed. And he thought that he had died, but later he realized that Joey was faking being dead. So Dennis then put 2 t-shirts and a plastic bag over his head and left him in his own, and then like took him to his own room and left him to die slowly.
Oh, God.
And that's when he went back for Josephine. And she was the last one alive. And he brought her downstairs to the basement. He bound her and gagged her. And by the way, if anybody wants to fast forward through this, it's very upsetting. She's 11 years old.
Wow.
He brought her downstairs, bound her and gagged her, laid her on the floor, and as he fastened a noose above her head, as she saw him do, and this is after she saw him murder her entire family, well, minus the kids who are not home. He then did some very nasty things to her, which I don't even want to say.
Really? That bad?
I mean, he just like fondled her. Like he didn't rape her, but it's just really gross.
Yeah, okay.
For an 11-year-old girl.
Fair.
Then he hoisted her up and watched her hang to death. And as she died,
loved every second of it.
Loved her. He jerked off on her legs.
Wow.
And left a big puddle of sperm, jizz, whatever we call it. Gross. After, yeah, and then that was done. Everybody was dead. After leaving the Otero home in their own car, Dennis left their family station wagon at a grocery store parking lot.
Took their car.
Before realizing that he left his knife in their home. So then he went back to the house in his own car, re-entered the home, found the knife in the backyard where he must have dropped it while he was attacking Joey, and left. After retrieving the knife,
dear God, okay,
Dennis was finally finished. He was very upset with himself for making such a big mistake, and he vowed to be much more careful in the future. Dennis went home. He was freaking out. He could not calm his mind. He was convinced that the police were just going to break down his door at any moment. He was shitting himself.
I wish they did. I mean,
he combed through his car. He cleaned it thoroughly. He took every piece of hidden fucked up materials that he had, all his journals and drawings and detective novels and everything. He burned them in his backyard. He removed all his clothes that he'd been wearing, and he drove them to his parents' house where no one was home. At first, he thought he was going to burn the clothes in the backyard, but then he thought that was too suspicious. So he shoved all his clothes into the roof of his parents' old hen house. Okay. He would be back for them later. Later that day,
okay.
At around 3:30 p.m., the three older kids came home and found their parents sprawled out dead in their bedroom. Charlie Otero, who I think is the oldest one, immediately went to call for help, only to find that their phone line had been cut. So he ran to a neighbor for help. When the police arrived, they found the parents stiff as boards, meaning rigor mortis had already set in. Mm-hmm. These people had been dead for hours, they surmised.
Wow.
Joseph Otero was found lying on his back on the floor. His ankles had been bound. There were pieces of tied up cord lying next to him. The police would later find out that Charlie had cut off a lot of these restraints when they found them. So unfortunately, like there was a lot of things that really contaminated the crime scene because these kids like stumbled upon their dead parents. You know?
Fair. Yeah. I mean, you're gonna go and look at your family members, like,
or like you don't know that they're
check
dead,
to make they're alive. Yeah,
exactly. There was a plastic bag next to Joseph that had been ripped off of his head by his son. There was blood smeared all over his face, and his hands were swollen to a very large size. Julie was found lying on her back on the bed. She was wearing a blue house coat, and there was blood smeared all over her very swollen face. Carmen June had cut the gag from her mouth, and some other bindings which lay beside her and her ankles were still bound like Joseph's. Most of the dresser drawers were opened and appeared to have been rifled through. Upon further search through the house, the officer came across the dead body of the youngest Otero, Joey. Joey was found lying on his side on the floor on his bedroom next to his bunk bed. His head had been encased with 3 hoods, a white t-shirt, a plastic bag, and a blue t-shirt. His ankles were bound with a cord like his parents. There was another cord that extended behind Joey's back that bound his wrists. And his hands were also extremely swollen. Beside Joey's head sat a Wichita phone book, and a few feet away from the bunk bed sat a child's wooden chair, and the bottom rung was broken.
Okay, phone book also.
Further searching the house, another officer went down to the dark basement. The lights were out, and he got to the family's laundry room and entered, and as he searched for a light switch, he bumped into something. Once he flicked on the light, he realized that hanging from a noose was the body of 11-year-old Josie. And Josie was hanging just low enough for the tips of her toes to be touching the ground. The noose was fashioned out of a cord, and her hands were tied tightly behind her back and attached to a cord tied around her wrist. There were more cords wrapped around her knees and also her ankles. She had a gag in her mouth made from a towel, and her tongue was sticking out over the top. It had swollen and become a very deep shade of purple. Josie was wearing a blue t-shirt. Her underwear had been pulled down to her ankles and her bra had been cut off. And on her bare leg was a large glob of semen that ran down her leg to form
disgusting
a giant puddle on the floor.
Ew.
This quadruple homicide rocked the town of Wichita. It was absolutely brutal and sadistic. 2 young children had been murdered. There was a sexual aspect to it with Josephine, which was particularly disturbing. The police were completely stumped. They could not figure out any motive or any real suspects. And Dennis continued to experience paranoia. But as February came and went and no police came knocking, he began to feel confident enough to start hunting for a next victim.
Wow.
So that was brutal. And
that's awful. That's crazy that he just went from nothing to that.
Personally, I think that's the worst one. It's the worst one because there are children involved.
Okay.
He does not murder children ever again. And I think what happened with this one is he learned many lessons. Like he evolves.
God.
He learned very quickly, like, don't go for entire families. Although he kind of does again, but you'll see what happens.
But he got away with it.
Yeah, he gets away with a lot of murders. And I think the thing that he does that keeps him from being on the police's radar the best is he chooses random people and doesn't have a type.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
It's like, how do you tie it? There's no way to link him because it's
not
random.
Yes. Yeah. That is like the typical thing that gets these people is when it's like the same victim profile over and over again.
Or anybody that's like in your life,
That's very Israel Keys of him.
Yes. So he starts hunting again in February. And on April 4th, 1974, he will go on to kill Kathy Bright.
Oh, God.
Kathy Bright lived...
How much sooner after was it, Madison?
So the Oteros were January 15th, 1974. And now we're in April 1974. So just a few months.
So pretty fucking soon after.
So Kathy Bright lived with her sister, Karen Bright. They lived together in a lower middle class neighborhood in Wichita. The two sisters both worked at the Coleman Company. Interesting, his old company.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I don't remember what they do, but
so random.
Something random. Dennis Rader had spotted Kathy one afternoon in March while driving his wife, Paula, around. Kathy was at her mailbox. She was minding her own business. He remembers her purse and he remembers her ponytail. He knew immediately that this was the woman he wanted to kill next. Dennis went back to her house a number of times to scope out the place. It was next to an empty lot on one side and what looked to be an abandoned house on the other. Perfect. He realized that she seemed to live with at least one other woman. Dennis grew very excited and he planned. Everything had to go perfectly. And he was determined to learn from his previous mistakes. No big families, no men, no dogs. The dog didn't really, he just put the dog out in the back.
Yeah, the dog seems like it was chilling.
Yeah, it wasn't, but
it's not the dogs that bite the face off of intruders.
No, but it's just like,
unfortunately, in this case.
If only they just know the person, like a good person to bite the face off of.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's not, they just don't know who's a killer and who's not. Anyway, he arrived at the home one day and he knocked on the door and no one answered, so he left. Then he went back home, kept planning. And on April 4th, he came back. He knocked on the door and no one answered. But this time he didn't leave. He went around to the back, he cut the phone line, and he broke into the home.
Oh, I hate that.
He looked around, he got a lay of the home, and then he sat and he waited for Kathy to arrive home.
Okay.
When he heard her car pull up to the driveway, he got very excited. And everything went to shit because Kathy was not alone. She was accompanied by her 19-year-old brother, Kevin.
Good.
Only a little while later, at approximately 12:30 p.m. on April 4th, 1974, 19-year-old Kevin Bright burst out of his sister's shared home, bloody and screaming.
Oh,
a man who was passing by in a car picked him up, called 911 from a mechanic down the street. Remember, there's no cell phones at this time.
Yep.
and drove him over to the hospital. When the police arrived, they were ready to catch the perpetrator in the act, but unfortunately, he had already fled. The first officer did find 21-year-old Kathy Bright lying on her side in a pool of blood in the living room,
Oh, God.
barely hanging on to life. She was able to
Wow.
faintly whisper, "Help me," a few times.
Oh, my God.
And the paramedics raced Kathy to the hospital, but she died 5 hours later on the operating table.
Wow.
Kathy had been stabbed 11 times in her torso, puncturing all of her major organs. Police immediately combed the house. They found it a mess. There was blood smeared everywhere. The back room looked as though Kathy had been tied to a chair, but somehow managed to escape and get to the phone. Not that this would have been any use, as the line had been cut. There were a few spent casings on the ground, and eventually some bullets were found lodged in the walls. In the
Wow.
kitchen, the back door window had been shattered, and the glass was swept into a neat pile. The police did have one helpful piece of evidence, a big one. Kevin had survived his injuries, and he was very eager to assist in the investigation. Kevin's timeline and breakdown of the day was as follows.
Okay.
Kevin drove from his parents' place to visit his sisters, Kathy and Karen. That morning, sorry, I'm getting a little out of breath. I hope that once I have the baby, I will stop breathing like this, but I don't know.
I mean, there's a huge baby like crushing your lungs, so
We'll see. Ooh, excuse me. Okay. That morning, Karen had gone to the Coleman Company to work a morning shift, and Kathy had gone with Kevin to the bank. He was interested in applying for a loan to fund an invention he was working on,
okay.
and Kathy was helping him through the process. Side note, he was not successful at acquiring the loan.
Okay.
When Kathy and Kevin returned home from the bank, there was a, quote, dark-haired man with a slight pot belly, standing about 5'11" tall, wearing a stocking cap, gloves, and a white t-shirt and a green parka, standing in the living room, and he was holding a pistol, end quote, says Kevin.
No.
The man ordered them to stop. He told them he needed their car keys and $100. He told them that he was on a lam from California and he needed to get to New York. Kathy apparently told him to get lost, and the man did not like this. He used his gun to force the two of them into the back room where he had a chair set up. On a nearby bed, he had various ligatures and bindings made out of rope and nylons that he had found around the house. The man ordered Kevin to tie up his sister on the chair and for him to lie down on the floor. The man then bound Kevin's arms and legs with a pair of jeans and stockings. And then he put a pillow under Kevin's head, and he told Kathy to walk into the next room, which somehow she was able to do while she was strapped to the chair. Kevin described the man as both forceful and gentle. The man, like, remember how I said, like, with the Oteros, like, he's putting pillows under their heads, like, he's doing this specifically to make them feel safe so that he can get them and, like, he can, like, shock them at the end because he's a sadistic fuck.
Yeah.
So the man left the room. He could be heard rifling through drawers and cupboards and slamming doors. And even this, he would do this because he would pretend to be like taking food and stuff and being like, I need this stuff because I'm on the run or whatever, like purposely leading them to believe that like he was there for a reason and would leave.
Yeah.
After a few minutes, he was back and he immediately knelt down beside Kevin and started strangling Kevin, either with a rope or a pair of nylons. The man used so much force that it yanked Kevin up off the floor. And that's when Kevin realized what was happening and that he was now fighting for his life. So Kevin started wriggling and fighting. And within seconds, Kevin was able to get his hands out of the bindings and free himself. But the man grabbed his gun and shot Kevin in the forehead.
Never mind.
The shot knocked Kevin back and Kevin fell unconscious. But a few seconds later, Kevin came to and he could hear Kathy shouting, "You shot my brother," from the other room. And Kevin was able to stand up. But the man could then hear Kevin, so he came back to the room. And when Kevin saw the man, he went for the man's gun, which was tucked into his waistband of his pants. He was able to get the gun and pointed at the man's chest, but then the man grabbed it and held his finger beneath the hammer of the gun, which prevented him from pulling the trigger. They fought for the gun for a little bit, and the man was able to wrestle it back from Kevin. He then shot at Kevin's head again and missed, and then shot one more time, getting Kevin in the mouth. The bullet tore through his upper lip, but Kevin's two front teeth actually deflected the bullet and saved his life.
Wow.
Luckily for Kevin, the man presumed that the last shot had killed him, although he did jump on top of Kevin and tie a rope around his neck, and he pulled it tight. Kevin was blacked out for probably a few minutes, and then he woke up at the sound of Kathy's screams.
Oh no.
But he made the quick decision to run for it and get help. He thought that was the best option, which it was. The police arrived at the scene only 15 minutes later, but it was too late for Kathy.
Fuck.
Kevin also helped to make a composite sketch of the man, but it was not the most helpful photo. And this is more for Aidan, but the sketch was later described on Reddit as much more closer resembling Bobby Lee. We'll put that photo here. It's in the drive.
Bobby Lee?
Bobby Lee is a comedian, and I think Aidan listens to his podcast.
Okay.
He used to be on Mad TV.
That's funny. It just randomly looks exactly like him. I'm looking at the photo right now. I guess it does. It doesn't look like the other photos of Dennis. So
Bobby Lee is like a short Asian man. So
yeah.
Really
it does look like him. It really does, and it does not look anything like the actual murderer. So
and poor Kevin.
I mean,
was
whatever,
shot twice.
Yeah.
I don't know how good composite sketches are. Whatever.
Was that in the John Douglas book?
No, I was with the sketches, but then I was on Reddit looking into it, and everyone's like, "It's Bobby Lee."
That's funny.
Anyway,
yes.
Police found very little evidence in the home, no fingerprints or DNA of any kind. They canvassed the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen anything suspicious, but that didn't lead to anything either. At the time, nobody linked this murder to the Otero murders. The victimology was completely different. He had used a knife and a gun on the victims. The knots he had tied were very different. Plus, they a lot of them had been cut at the Otero residence, so they were you couldn't really compare them. Apparently, there were some individual detectives who talked about the possibility that these two cases could have been linked, but there was nothing noted officially. In October of 1974, the police arrested a man named Gary Sebrig. Sebrig was a local weirdo who once had raped a duck.
What?
It's just a weird, and everybody says had sex with a duck, but the duck did not consent. He raped the duck. So
I don't. Okay.
People, it happens more than you think.
Yes. Really more. Really. Oh.
Ask anybody who works on a farm.
More than the electro ejaculation.
Yeah. No, I think so.
Oh God.
I mean, boys in the city just do it to pies, apparently, according to American Pie. But if you're
that's so different.
Yeah,
that's very different.
Agreed, but
an inanimate object.
This is just what I hear. Anyway,
okay.
Gary had recently been caught for molesting a 5-year-old girl, and he was brought in for questioning about the molestation, and he made some comments about the Otero murders. Apparently, he said, quote, "If I were doing the Oteros, this is how I would have done it. It would have been with my brother, and we would have tied them all up, and my buddy Thomas Mayer would have been there with us." And
wow, incriminating.
So they were like, okay, that's fucking incriminating.
Yeah.
All 3 men mentioned by Gary had histories of sexual offenses and mental health issues. Okay. All 3 were brought in for questioning. All 3 were questioned and placed in a local psychiatric hospital. None of them were charged, but there was media coverage concerning all 3 and their possible links to the Otero murders. The real killer, Dennis Rader, was not happy about all of this. He did not like that other people were getting credit for his work. On October, but also he didn't want to get caught. So
yeah, it's be happy that somebody else is getting blamed, but okay.
But he really liked the idea of terrorizing a community. That's what he really wanted to do. On October 22nd, 1974, the real killer made a call to the Otero murder hotline. This hotline had been set up by Wichita's 2 biggest newspapers. It was columnist Don Granger who picked up, and immediately the killer said, quote, "Listen and listen good, because I'm not going to repeat myself." And then he went on to explain that the man responsible for the Otero murders stuck a letter inside a medical engineering textbook on the 2nd floor of the Wichita Public Library.
Oh, he loves the library.
He acted very annoyed during this phone call. Yeah, he does. He does like the library. Grange phoned the police, and within minutes, they had a detective in the library searching for the textbook. They located in the textbook a white envelope with the name Bill Thomas Kilman written on it.
Okay.
BTK.
Oh.
In the envelope was a letter. It was riddled with spelling and grammatical errors.
Yep.
And it was the original, not a photocopy. And let me.
I feel like murderers don't call the police anymore. Like, I feel like that's not a thing, but they
No,
used to do
God,
that
no.
all the time.
You cannot get away with a lot of the shit that he got away with
Yeah.
anymore, obviously. Okay, so let's see. Here's what the letter said, and I'll go through a little bit of this, and you'll see it's okay. It says, Otero case. I write this letter to you for the sake of the taxpayer as well as your time. Those 3 dudes you have in custody are just talking to get publicity for the Otero murders. They know nothing at all. I did it by myself and no one's help. There has been no talk either. Let's put it straight. Joe, position, southwest bedroom, feet tied to the bed, head pointing southerly direction. Bondage, window blind cord. Garrote, blind cord, brown belt. Death, the old bag trick and strangulation with clothesline rope. Clothed, white sweatshirt, green pants. Comments, he threw up at one time. Had rib injury from wreck a week before. Laying on coat. Then he goes through, I won't read it all.
Like, he can't stand that somebody else is getting credit.
Exactly. He goes through each victim and like so much detail that they're like, there's no way, like, we didn't release all this information. It's so detailed. I won't go through all of it because it's a little bit boring, but then he goes on to say all victims had their hands tied behind their backs, gags of pillowcase material, slip knots on Joe and Joseph, neck to hold, leg down, blah, blah, blah. He goes through a lot of it. I'm sorry this happened to society. There are the ones who suffer the most. It's hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with sexual perversion hang up. When this monster enters my brain, I will never know. Yeah, I think he meant to say, when this monster entered my brain, I will never know. But it is here to stay. How does one cure himself? If you ask for help that you have killed 4 people, they will laugh or hit the panic button and call the cops. I can't stop it, so the monster goes on and hurt me as well as society. Society can be thankful that there are ways for people like me to relieve myself at a time by daydreams of some victims being tortured and being mine. It's a big, complicated game, my friend, of the monster play putting victims down number. He's so bad at grammar.
I know.
Follow
this
them.
Makes no sense.
Checking up on them, waiting in the dark, waiting. The pressure is great, and sometimes he run the game to his liking. Maybe you can stop him. I can't. He has already chosen his next victim or victims. I don't know who they are yet. The next day after you read the paper, I will know, but it too late. Good luck hunting. Yours truly guilty. P.S. Since sex criminals do not change their MO or by nature cannot do so, I will not change mine. The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK. You see, he added again. They will be on the next victim.
Wow.
Aggressive. Now, it's funny because John Douglas makes a really big point of this. So he mentions about like sex criminals do not change their MOs.
Yes.
That is not true. Sex criminals or any criminals do change their MOs. They don't change their signature or a ritual. So I just find this interesting. So
what's the difference? Because I don't quite know.
Yeah. So MO is the method or procedure, an operation or pattern of criminal behavior. Repeating the same criminal acts using the same method. So in this case, strangulation, suffocation, bindings of victims, killing them one by one, stuff like that, the how they did it. Whereas the signature or ritual is like the use of bindings or gags, a form of psychological torture where he denies the victims a quick death, or like the fact that he makes them believe that they're going to be fine and then in the end kills them because he wants to see in their eyes like that he tricked them and that they know that they're going to die. That's the why. That's why he does it.
Yeah.
So he has them. He's thinking signature ritual when really he means MO. The second murder had a completely different MO. He has different weapons. He had different, and mind you, I think that is because it, like the way that things happened. But what we learned from that, or what they've learned from that, is like this guy's at least studied some sort of criminology. Maybe he's a police officer.
Ooh.
He knows what the term MO means, kind of.
Yeah.
The way that he wrote down all of like how the people were bound and what everything that he did. A lot of the first people who were looking into this case were like, okay, this guy is like an ex-police officer, or like he wanted to be a police officer or something, judging on his writings. Excuse me. Okay, so a couple interesting things about the letter. It was very, very difficult to read through because he's so bad.
I know.
So in the letter, he left out the murder of Kathy Bright. And we think that this is probably because that murder did not go well. He was not happy with that one at all. He left a witness. He didn't want to draw attention to it.
Yep.
The letter, as I've been saying, included an insane amount of detail, which only the killer would know. So the implication was that either the killer had a photographic memory, or more likely that he had photographed the crime scene, because it was that detailed. And there was a couple things that were not correct, but like nothing, but it was, they were like, he probably just didn't remember properly, whatever, like very, very minor things. I don't remember what, but it was so incredibly detailed. Many experts pored over the letter. There was huge debate among the police about whether or not to take the letter public. On the one hand, it could have been helpful in figuring out who this guy was. Maybe somebody in the public would recognize the writings, a la Unabomber. On the other hand, the police knew that it would bring a lot of false leads, and they did not think that they would have the manpower to handle them all. And they chose to keep this letter to themselves. John Douglas thinks that this was a mistake. And I agree. This letter was like, his writing is so bad and so specific. I think they would have had a really good chance of finding somebody who recognized that. But that's just my own little tidbit.
Okay.
After this letter, BTK was quiet for years. During this time, Dennis became super paranoid about being caught, but he never did. And he began to ease up. He focused on his job and his family life. And those around him described him still as being a loving husband to Paula.
Weird.
They had their first son, their first child. It was a son named Brian in July of 1975. And Dennis got a job working as a construction and insulation supervisor at ADT Security.
It's weird. It's crazy how he's like, his wife has no idea and they're just on great terms.
And this, by the way, is where I'm ending part 1.
Wow.
So it's a lot of information. And yes, and to the end.
I can't believe that. Like,
to the end.
Imagine being like married to somebody and not fucking knowing they murder people.
It's insane, but it's happened a number of times.
It clearly, yeah. But how does he compartmentalize his just like fucked upness?
That's what I think that's what he'd been working on since he was a teenager, even a young, even before then. As soon as he realized like that's what's going on in my head, it's not normal.
Yeah.
He spent all of his time was spent fantasizing about raping and killing people, and figuring out how to come off as normal. And he did a really good job at it.
Yeah.
And that's because I think he knew. I think from a very young age, he probably knew that this is how he would end up. I think that he really tried to avoid that for a while, but I think he kind of always knew that it would happen. And because he knew that would happen, he really tried hard to perfect the facade and like the way that he came across to people, because he knew that the only way he'd get away with it is if he came off as a nice normal guy.
Yeah. Wow. That's so creepy. It's creepier when they seem normal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, because it's so unassuming.
Yeah,
that's the scariest part about all of this, is that like never once. And you'll see how he gets caught. It's very funny. Yeah, it is funny. But he is on, they don't catch him sorry, spoiler, till like the 2000s.
Wow.
He's at large for 30 years.
That's crazy.
And never once did his name come up.
Yeah, he's really good at hiding it.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll end it there for today.
Okay.
Please come back next week for part 2.
Oh.
There's more murders and a lot more of like what he's doing in his own time. And
I'm really interested. More scrapbooking, more collaging.
Oh, there's so much arts and crafts. This man has
I love arts and crafts. Like I personally love arts and crafts. Like, that's awesome. But really,
this man has a lot of crafting, and that's so random. that's where later, like, there's so much evidence because he like hoards all his after the Otero murders, he burned everything.
Right.
But then from that point on, he keeps everything.
It's like, how is your wife not finding this? But okay,
he's good hiding spots.
Oh, wow.
So hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for more. Please give us a shout on Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast, Twitter at Who's Knocking Pod. I'm getting a little bit more active on there, so join me over there. We're on Facebook, and send us an email, hello@whosknockingpodcast.com. And I'm really interested between like the really popular cases like this one versus the less well-known cases.
Yeah.
Which do you like better? I like both, so whatever. Send us a suggestion. And please, everyone, stay safe out there because you never know
who's knocking.
Bye. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.